Hi everybody, Max and the Millions, chapter 7. You have a look, the typeface has changed for this chapter. So it's a different font, possibly meaning a different part of the story. Prince Luke swept the blue hair out of his eyes and faced his kingdom. Blue Castle shimmered beneath the light bulb. It was a beautiful sight. The tallest tower stretched over the desert sand, almost 3 inches in height. The castle had belonged to the Blues ever since the tribe first scattered across the floor. King Luke's father, King Adam, had discovered it in the desert himself. It just sat there, he said, waiting, as if someone had simply left it for them. Over 8 long weeks, the Blues had built huts around the castle and turned it into a huge city. King Adam had ordered his soldiers to find every splinter of wood on the floor and then use their splinters to construct huge walls to protect the city from attack by the Reds and the Greens. The entire Blue tribe, more than 10,000 people now, lived within the walls. Luke gulped. In less than a minute, he was going to become their ruler. King Luke, he said miserably. King Luke of the Blues. He slumped onto the sand. Didn't make any sense. He was about to become one of the most powerful men on the floor, and he was only 10 days old. Luke had never expected to become king. His father had always ruled the Blues. Luke liked being a prince. All he had to do was sit around the castle, being waited on by servants and occasionally taking naps. Every now and then somebody would make him go to the library and study, which as far as Luke could tell meant sitting in front of a table with lots of books on it and falling asleep. Then 2 hours ago, everything changed. Luke was eating in the grand dining hall. His father was late to dinner as usual. He was often too busy to eat with the rest of the household. Besides, King Adam was nearly 2 months old. He needed his rest. In fact, Luke thought, as he tucked into his dessert, his father was resting quite a lot nowadays. Then the dining hall doors burst open and a dozen Blue soldiers marched into the room. At the front stood Malcolm, the king's adviser. His bright blue beard, which reached past his knees, was wet with tears. "The king is dead," he cried. The diners gasped in horror. Malcolm held up King Adam's wooden crown and sword. "He died as he lived, throwing things and shouting at his servants." The dining hall was in uproar. King Adam dead? He had always ruled the Blues. Without him in charge, the tribe would have starved to death in weeks. Who could possibly replace him? Luke was asking himself that exact question when Malcolm turned to him with the crown. "Arise, King Luke." It was that simple. One moment Luke was on his second helping of jelly. The next moment everyone was bowing down to him. He nearly choked. "Me, king?" "Yes, you," said Malcolm. "Now come on, arise." Luke didn't know what arise meant, so he stood up instead. Malcolm started lowering the crown onto his head. "That looks heavy," Luke whimpered. "For great one's sake, Luke, try to look like a king," Malcolm whispered. "Everyone's watching." Malcolm put the crown on Luke's head. Luke's legs buckled under the weight and he hit the floor like a rail of shirts. After that, everyone agreed that they should do a proper coronation, one where Luke didn't fall over. All 10,000 Blues would gather below the tallest tower to watch him take up his father's sword, recite the entire Book of the Floor by heart, and become their new king. The only problem was Luke didn't want to become king. He wasn't anything like his father. He was clumsy and forgetful and small for his age. He had no idea how to lead an army, or give speeches, or defend the city from attacks by the Reds and the Greens. Now he'd be responsible for 10,000 Blues, all of whom needed feeding, and the only way to do that was to make the long quest to the Bin Kingdom. The leader of the Green tribe, the Bin King, had claimed the Bin when the tribes first scattered, and now it was the only source of food on the floor. The Bin King could force the other tribes to pay a ransom whenever he felt like it, and he usually did. Luke would have to make the perilous journey across the floor to negotiate prices, then transport all the food back to Blue Castle while avoiding bands of Red marauders. He had never been even outside the city walls. Second by second, the coronation grew closer. The final rehearsal for the coronation had been a complete disaster. During the bit where Luke was supposed to take up his father's sword and swear to protect the kingdom, he tripped over his robes, which were far too big for him, and sliced off Malcolm's beard. "For great one's sake," cried Malcolm, tying his beard back on. "The ceremony is only a few minutes away and you're still not ready. Please tell me you've at least learnt the Book of the Floor by now." Luke cringed. "I've been trying, honest, there's just so much. I know the first bit where the Great One makes everything and the wise man appears, but after that..." Malcolm was furious. He shoved the book into Luke's hands. "Go out into the desert," he snapped, "and don't come back till you've learnt it." Luke was on the verge of tears. "Malcolm, please, I don't know how to do this. I'm not my father." But Malcolm wasn't listening. Luke made his way miserably to the stables and found his prized flea Excelsior. She was one of the finest steeds on the floor, sleek, polished and intelligent. Luke had found her when she was just a pupper and raised her himself. She was his best and his only friend. I'm not sure if you say that pupa or pupper. Anyway, Excelsior squeaked happily when she saw him and hopped in circles, trying to play with him. "Not now, girl," said Luke glumly. "We've got work to do." Luke rode on her back and she bounded out from the city walls. They rode until Blue Castle was far behind them and there was nothing around but desert. Luke climbed off Excelsior and patted her side affectionately. "Off you go, girl. Not too far now." Excelsior hopped across the dunes, leaving Luke by himself. He sighed. There was a time when the thought of being outside the city on his own would have terrified him. But red marauders and sand spiders didn't frighten him any more. There were much scarier things waiting for him back at Blue Castle. Luke took off his father's crown and sword and threw them to one side. He wished he felt sadder about his father's death, but the truth was Luke had barely known him. King Adam might have been a great ruler, but he was a rubbish dad. The one quality time they ever spent together was once a day on Luke's birth minute, when King Adam would storm into his bedroom, ask Luke why he was so small, then storm out again. Whenever Luke tried to ask about his mother, whom he had never known, or tried to tell King Adam that he was bored inside the castle with no one to play with except his pet flea, his father simply hadn't listened. "I guess the only one who listens to me is you, Excelsior." But Excelsior wasn't paying attention. She was busy digging into the sand for crumbs. Luke grumbled and opened the Book of the Floor and said, "So the wise man sent the people across the floor to explore and build their world. And so it was that the tribes settled in their respective kingdoms, the reds at the bed, the greens in the bin, and the blues in the castle. And there they waited for the moment when the Great One would return through the bedroom door." Luke gazed up at the bedroom door. It dominated the wall ahead of him, stretching up higher than he could make out. He couldn't imagine how something could simply walk through it. It was like trying to imagine the sky falling or the bulb going out. But supposedly one day, that was exactly what would happen. The Great One would come back to the floor and take them away, because he loved them, because he wanted to protect them, because he was always listening. "Are you there?" Luke's voice faded across the dunes. He swallowed. "Great One, I know you're busy fighting demon and everything, but if you're listening, then please help me." The bedroom door stood still and silent. The only sound was Excelsior chasing her own antennae in the distance. "I'm not ready for this," said Luke. "I can't protect the city from the Reds or stop the Binking from raising food prices. I'm too young to be king." He let his words drift over the desert. "Please, just someone else do it. Stop the coronation. Just do something." Luke waited expectantly. The desert was silent. Nothing. Luke let out a great sigh. Of course nothing happened. The Great One wasn't listening to him really. Luke was just another tiny voice. He turned to Blue Castle, waiting for him in the distance. "Oh, well," he said, "here goes not..." The world turned black. Luke gasped. A great wave of darkness spread across the dunes, blackened the sand and headed towards his kingdom. Luke watched as the enormous shadow stole across the rooftops and swallowed the castle in darkness. Excelsior bounded back to him, burying his head in his armpit and squeaking in terror. Luke stood bolted to the spot, his heart pounding. He had seen something like this before when he was 3 days old. A fly had flown in front of the bulb and cast its shadow on the floor. Luke had been terrified. He thought it was a huge monster creeping over the sand to eat him. He thought it was demon. But this was no fly. This was huge. There was nothing on the floor that was this big. Nothing except... Luke turned round and his mouth fell open in amazement. The bedroom door was opening. Right in front of his eyes, a vast rectangle of shadow was cutting across the bulb, splitting the floor in two. And standing in the doorway was... You're going to have to wait for chapter 8.